Now let's talk about virtual performance audio editing. We're going to create the ensemble sound that we would want in our dream ensemble in a live performance. So rather than trying to address the audio and the video all together, we're going to split them into two different things. I know that feels like we might be doing our work twice, but I promise you, you're going to get better results and have a lot fewer headaches than if you were trying to edit them all at the same time. Not to mention the fact that audio editing software and video editing software have very different goals and very different functionality. This really helps you focus on what that program is doing well and serves your final project better. So your students have all just uploaded their videos to a cloud like Google Classroom, and then you're going to download them all. This is where when you download them, you want to move them over to your external hard drive. I like to sort them by voice part, and when I download them, because you're downloading from a browser, they're going to zip the files. So it takes a little bit to zip them, but then once you download the zip file, you can move the zip file straight over to your external hard drive before you unzip it, before you extract the file. It's a small step, but when you're working with 50, 60, 70, 80 different videos, that little extra step of moving a zipped file around is a whole lot quicker than moving a big stack of video files. If you haven't worked with video files yet, you'll notice that they are very large and they cause your computer to run quite slowly if you don't manage them correctly. So you're going to save yourself a lot of headache later if you create your folders in advance and you sort things in advance and you name things in advance. So from Google Classroom, you may not have realized this is even a thing, but if I look under the student work tab, right below the name of the assignment, I can see who's turned it in, who hasn't turned it in, how many of them have been graded. And there's a little folder icon under there. That is the folder that contains anything that students have uploaded as part of their assignment work. So if you create an assignment that requires them to submit a recording for the virtual ensemble, all of the virtual ensemble recordings will be inside that folder, sorted by class. So then you can just go through those and download them quite simply. And then this is what a little thing on my portable hard drive looks like. I've got my Earthsong split by voice parts, alto, bass, soprano, tenor. I've got my audio files there. I've got my movies, that's all my prompts. And then the very top is my final pieces. So it's all sorted and organized in a way that made sense to me, sorted and organized in a way that makes sense to you in yours as well. And that way you won't lose a student's recording, you won't misplace something and then have to spend time searching for it later. I think it is by far easier and better to work with one voice or instrument part at a time. So I'm only going to work with my basses right now. I'm only going to work on them. I'm going to take every bass track, I'm going to put them together, and I'm only going to edit them. A lot of audio software will extract the audio from a video for you. So you can just take that video and open it up inside an audio editing software and just work with the audio. You don't have to touch the video at all. Working with a single part means that you can work on accuracy, you can work on unification, you can work on tone color and quality, and the blend within that section before you start looking at things across sections and with different parts of the ensemble. So, if my basses are having pitch issues, the last thing I want to do is have them sing with all the rest of my ensemble. Well, in a digital setting, in a virtual setting, it's the same way. Work with one small piece at a time, get that perfect, and then move on to the next piece. Oh, as a side note, if you created your prompt with the section leaders doing demos, or if you created a demo for each part, then that is your starting point at this part of the project. If I made a track that I sent out to my basses that had my bass section leader on it, then I'm going to start editing with my bass section leader. I'm going to add tracks to that one at a time. The first thing you're going to do is to sync those files in time using the clap sync points that I mentioned before, and you're going to sync them with the accompaniment track. Once you get one part and the accompaniment track together, now that's your reference for every other part. And like I said a second ago, if you created a demo track, you already have the starting point. You just keep adding tracks to that. Once you've edited a track and you've got it where you need to be, you can mute it, disable it, lock it, depending on the program, they'll call it different things, and then move on to the next one. So, audio editing. This is the interface for Logic Pro X, and it's gonna look fairly similar to several other audio editing software. This is the one that I used, and this is one that I think worked really well for me. But if you use a different one, then that's fine. A lot of this will transfer over. So on the top left corner, you see there's a plus sign. That's where I add a new track. You can see I started with my accompaniment as my track number 1, because that's the thing that's not going to change. That's the thing that I'm not going to edit at all. Then I moved to keep continuing adding other tracks, and these are all my tenors. I blurred out all the student names here. Kept adding new tracks in. Then track controls here at the bottom are going to show me, okay, this is muted, this is soloed, this is locked. So that way I see, okay, when I'm done, you can see most of these have the lock icon. That means when I've totally edited them and I'm totally finished with that, then it's locked and I can't accidentally delete something or change something. At the top, I've got my playback controls, which are your standard playback controls that you're used to seeing in lots of different things. And then I've got my timeline. Something to note is that in a lot of audio editing software, it's designed around digital music creation. So your timeline is actually going to be bar numbers, measure numbers. And in the settings, you can change it to be actual timestamps. I'm not creating any of this music digitally, so bar numbers at the top are completely meaningless for me. Plus, this song has a really uneven tempo and a lot of rubato, so the bar numbers are counterproductive at that point. So I changed it to timestamps, and those make a lot more sense to me because I'm creating a movie, and in a movie, the timestamp is very important. You can see here the little waveforms of each of the audio files where students have created claps, and you can see there's 4 lines and then a break and then 4 lines. And each of those 4 lines is a clap. If you look right above the word sync points, you can see in my accompaniment where all those metronome clicks are. And that's where that will line up really well. Once you get them lined up in time, you only have to do a little bit more editing to kind of figure out, okay, I have to do this and do that. You can see the blue areas here are where the audio file is uninterrupted, and all of the gray areas are spots where it's muted. Generally, when it's muted, it's because a student missed an entrance or missed a cutoff, and it kind of just threw things off a little bit. So I just took that section out and I either made it quiet or I muted it altogether. With all of the windows open, you have a lot of other options here. These other options are things that you're only going to use sometimes. You're not going to use all of the time. The library here is something that you're going to use a lot if you're creating music digitally, like if you're creating your own accompaniment track using MIDI. If you're not, if it's all live recordings from students, then the library you can keep minimized and set away the whole time. The inspector right here is what you're going to use for editing on each individual track. And so if you want to do EQ or reverb or things like that, you're going to do that in the inspector pane. Again, you probably won't use a whole lot of that for your particular performance. Maybe you will, but you probably won't need to use a whole lot. The editor area is something that you will use a lot because you'll be using that to cut things that are, maybe wrong or a little too long or a little too short, and trim the audio files down a little bit. We'll come back to this in a second, but you'll notice that in this particular file, I've already combined all my sopranos, all my altos, all my tenors, all my basses into each their own track. We'll come back to that in a bit. So when something that I had to do some research, and I couldn't realize what I was doing wrong when I first started doing this, is that when you extract audio from a video, it's going to be locked. It's going to be time locked, because Logic knows that, oh, that's audio that's with a video. We don't want to mess around with the timing on it because it'll throw it out of time. Well, that's good for Logic Pro to think that, except that the reason you're editing it is because it's already wrong. It's already out of time, and you need to adjust it to be in time. So you're going to have to go to Preferences, and you're going to have to enable Advanced Tools. This is what Advanced Tools looks like. If you go to Preferences in Logic Pro, you can enable all of those things. That's going to let you control-click a video, and the very first option is going to be Unlock SMPTE Position. That lets you actually edit a video that's part of edit an audio that's part of a video track. Once you do that, then you're golden. But if you don't do that, you're going to spend a lot of time wondering, why can't I edit this thing? Why won't it let me do it? So Logic Pro, Preferences, Advanced, and then you can enable all of that. You can edit the audio as much or as little as you want. It's really just a matter of personal preference and your own time. For me, I decided to focus on things like entrances and cutoffs, because those are going to stand out the most. I focused on background noise because that's going to detract a lot from it. If there were serious pitch issues, then I muted that note or those notes. For the recordings that we're doing, I did not do any auto tune or pitch correction. It's just, there's a lot of people singing the right note. There's one person singing the wrong note. So for that note, I just muted that note, and, we never even noticed it. And then balance within each part. You're going to have to adjust that, because one singer is going to be really quiet. One singer is going to be really loud. One's going to be close to their microphone. One's going to be far from their microphone. You'll have to make some adjustments in that. As far as background noise, if you are an incredibly experienced editor, which I am not, then you can do a lot to reduce background noise without the quality of the voice or the quality of the audio suffering too much. But I found it to be rather challenging to really strike a balance there. So there's some background noise, and avoid what you can, clip out what you can, but some of it's going to be in there. I noticed that for my higher pitches, for my sopranos, it was hard to get rid of like air conditioner hums and ceiling fan hums, because it was such a close pitch to what they were actually singing. So that, just food for thought on that. So when you have all your tracks here together, you'll notice all those little tiny snips in there are where I made a break between tracks. Sometimes that's because there was a wrong note or a missed entrance and I snipped it out. Sometimes it's because I needed the track to be in different pieces, because I needed to adjust the volume of one part of the track, like say the verse, to a different level than I needed to do another part of the track, like the chorus. So each of those cuts you'll see is a little black line broken in the blue audio file. When you do have an issue where you have to make a cut, then you're going to get a really abrupt sound. It'll be a little hiccup in the audio, sort of feeling. And in order to smooth that out, you make a cut and then you use what's called the fade tool. And we'll go into more depth at another time on all the different tools. But the fade tool lets you smooth out cuts so you don't even notice them. It's an incredibly helpful tool there. Once you're done editing all the audio and each part is good, all your sopranos are good and all your basses are good, then export that. And Logic Pro calls that bounce. Okay, you'll export that and that creates an audio file. It changes it from a Logic Pro file to like a WAV file. Just continue with that until you have one audio file, one track for each part or instrument. And then you'll import all of them into one new thing. So that's what it looks like there. I have my soprano track, my alto track, my tenor track, my bass track, and that each of those has all my sopranos, all my altos, all my tenors, all my basses. And then with these, I created breaks as well, and those were for blending and balancing between sections. So over here, I can balance the track volume. That controls the volume of the entire song for that track. And over here, I can split them and then adjust each of those individual sections. We don't really have time to go through in a lot of the nuances of editing for this, but that's something to just keep in mind. And you can do some research on your own, or we can follow up with future sessions on that. So if you have questions about audio editing only, now's a good time to type them in the chat. A summary of what we just did: you're going to download the student videos, like from Google Classroom or whatever, put them on an external hard drive. Then you're going to extract your audio from the videos and edit the audio only. Don't worry about the video part now, just edit the audio. And it's kind of great because you're going to sort of get a chance to build the ensemble that you otherwise would in a rehearsal. Oh, I need this part to be a little bit louder, or this singer needs to come down a little bit, or things like that. And that way you build the audio exactly the way you want it. You're going to sync the audio in time with the accompaniment so that all of them are together. Spend your time to sync them, and you can do so. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Using those cut points, those sync points, you can do that visually even quicker than you can do it orally. You can line up them visually and say like, oh, this clap lines up right with those claps. And then you can just fine tune by listening to the track. So then once you've done that with each one, you're going to create a single audio file. You'll export or bounce for each of those instruments or parts, and then combine them all into one master one together. That's when you can worry about balance between sections. Edit that however you need to do, and then export. And like I said, I edited for entrances and cutoffs, for background noise, and for just like grossly inaccurate pitches. I didn't, and I edited for balance and blend. But I didn't edit any expression. I didn't do any auto-tune. I didn't do reverb, things like that. Did we have any questions in this section?
We have a couple.
Okay.
We have a couple. So for a small ensemble of 10 to 15 voices, would you still edit audio and video separately?
Yes, I would. I would edit audio and video separately. A couple of reasons. One is that you're going to have better tools in the audio editing than you will the video editing. Another is that, let's say I take that audio and someone missed a cutoff by 1/10 of a second. Now, 1/10 of a second doesn't sound like a lot, but you're going to orally perceive 1/10 of a second difference in a cutoff, especially if it's a really crisp cutoff. If I edit the audio separately, I can just extract that 1/10 of a second and I can shift their beginning or ending note around, or I can just mute that entirely. But in a video, if I start moving things around, you're going to get little video hiccups, things we call digital artifacts, where the video is going to stutter and shift in unnatural ways. You wouldn't notice the student's lips and audio not exactly lining up for 1/10 of a second because our lips are not that accurate and our eyes don't track lips that accurately. But you will notice a video artifact. So that's going to help keep your videos very smooth. If your students are pretty correct, you can spend a lot of time editing your audio to get the audio sounding perfect, and then just lay it on top of the video. And you won't have to do nearly as much editing on the video because your brain will kind of fill in the gaps as an audience. You'll just go like, oh yeah, they're singing and this is the sound. With my group of 12, I did them separately, audio and then video.
Okay, we have a question. Is there a plugin that can be used for getting rid of background noise? Also, what do you do if you have a small group and all voices count, but there are intonation issues considering time consumption?
Okay, so that's two questions. The first is yes, there are a number of tools and plugins that can help reduce background noise. If the audio is of really high quality, it's going to be easier to get rid of the background noise. If the audio is kind of fuzzy and soft and distant, it's going to be harder to get rid of the background noise. Part of that's going to be experience on your part as the editor. Part of that is going to be the limitations of your hardware and software. But for instance, Logic Pro has a number of noise reduction things. You can YouTube search the process that walks through. The second one is, what do you do if every voice counts and there are time constraints? Well, that's tricky. I think that your work on the front end in helping your students get it correct the first time is going to save you a lot of time. I think fixing something in pre-production is always better than fixing it in post-production for a number of reasons. It's going to be more natural, it's going to be a better sound, and most importantly, the result is the student is doing it correctly, which is really what we're all about. So fixing it in pre-production where the student gets it right the first time, or gets it right eventually, I guess I should say, before they send you the final recording, is probably your best starting point. Now, if you still have issues, there are ways that you can do pitch correction, right? You can go in and use auto-tune, and you can use pitch correction in Logic Pro and in a lot of audio editing software. So that would be your next step. Alternatively, if you've got one or two sections where it's an isolated voice and their partner is having problems that you can't really edit out, you can make that single voice a little bit louder. So there's 2 or 3 solutions on that.
Oh, one just came in. Can all audio be done in Audacity?
Can all audio be done in Audacity? Yes, you're just going to have limited tools. I love Audacity. I think it's a great program. It's not going to have quite the same level of functionality as Logic Pro because it's free versus a paid program. You're going to be missing out on a few of the things, but you can still hit all of the main things. And if you're really comfortable with Audacity, you might start there. You can get something to a pretty reasonable state there. And if you still can't get it all the way you want, then you can try looking at a different program.